Hello, welcome to the No Way Jose podcast. Again, today I'm joined by Doc Inferno. We'll be continuing our talk on the years of lead. We are on part 5 today. We'll be primarily kind of focusing or circling around the kidnapping of Aldo Moro. This is sort of the culmination of the political violence of the Red Brigades. So getting into all of that and much more. For those who like this series, like the show, like what you're seeing, be sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that bell for notifications. That way you can see when we're dropping new videos and when we're going live. We'll see you in the show.
We know the air is unfit to breathe and our food is unfit to eat. We sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy, so we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller, and all we say is, please, at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad.
Hello, Doc. Pleasure to have you back on the show. Looks like this week we'll be getting into the main course, it seems, of the Years of Lead. This seems to be the big kahuna of it all, kind of one of the main things people tend to focus on here. So it's a pleasure to be digging into it with you today, focusing a lot on the character of Aldo Moro.
Yeah, same here. It's a pleasure to be on here talking about Years of Lead, one of my favorite topics, and of course, with the side of political extremism and spaghetti tinfoil on the side.
Hell yeah. We got seances. I think I was reading some of the notes. We got all sorts of wild stuff.
I'm not
It'll
kidding.
be fun.
This is wild. This is like really wild. This whole foray into Aldo Moro is, and the thing about the Years of Lead, and this is why I think it's kind of hard to cover, is because there's like so many moving parts and so many actors that are involved. There's more actors in this than a Thomas Pynchon novel. And it's really, when you research all this stuff, it's hard to keep up with all these different groups because yes, it does seem like during the time these groups just proliferated like mushrooms, just grew out of the wild, and just the Red Brigades are kind of no exception. And one thing I want to say to the audience out there that maybe don't think this is of relevance to kind of American politics, I will say Italian politics are kind of nuanced and a little different. I was having this discussion with you about how like the politics in Italy itself is sort of unique because there are like various different components and layers. First of all, of course, everybody knows there's the underworld criminal aspect to a lot of this, which intersects, not surprisingly, maybe to some, with the state apparatchik and with the military intelligence agencies. So like there's all this labyrinthine type of machinations that just unfold and on top of each other. So yeah, it's a very complex subject and not covered by many people, I think, because the material and scarcity of like translated English material, most of the material unfortunately is biased shaded, I believe, maybe with an American perspective on it. It's very rarely that you get sort of a nuanced take on the years of lead, because everyone carries it, I guess, as a political football, whether you're on the left or right. Um, you know, I guess I'll just say this: I don't want to. I want to be bipartisan when I cover this, because I do eventually hope to cover sort of the more extreme right in Italy as well, and give them unbiased coverage, just as I'm doing with the extreme left. So even though I might have certain proclivities towards a certain, politics, when I'm, assessing the stuff, I don't want to seem like I'm biased, and I hope that wasn't conveyed. The takeaway, however, is that I believe a lot of people that are into anti-terrorism, and I'll just go on this rant real quick about anti-terrorism, is I think a lot of the academics and anti-terrorist people are kind of just doing guesswork, like you notice with a lot of the early criminologists. So that's why you have to have balance with that. That's why maybe even a person like Dave McGowan is needed when you kind of cover the true crime stuff, along with the Robert Ressler and the John Douglases. And the same thing is true with the Years of Lead, because they will just discount most of the involvement of the P2 Lodge and a lot of the other extra parliamentary subjects. And they will tell you that these groups like the Red Brigades, they just did it whole cloth, all by themselves. These people that couldn't plan kind of although they did successfully kidnap many people, they could not successfully plan all these different multitude of events. And especially with the Aldo Moro case, pretty much it was stratified. It was like they had roadblocks everywhere, and they will just tell you that there was no state involvement. There was no type of involvement from any type of intelligence agencies. The Americans didn't have anything to do with some of the involvement, even though you see certain types of diplomatic people have close ties to the CIA and into military intelligence. So, yeah, I think this is like a subject that is going to be evergreen, and something we can cover probably will reveal even into like our modern era, our digital age. We'll uncover more mysteries into it. And before I go into the subject and topic, I want to say that you have to also understand that Italians they love a great narrative. They love a great conspiracy. It's very much part of the fabric of Italian sort of history, from its like foundations to where they unify sort of the Risorgimento. So the Catholic Church and the Masonic lodges and all the different moving parts is very much a part of the Italian fabric. And I think even still today, if you look at, like, for instance, I looked at some of the comment sections on some of these, like where they were talking about these various events about Aldo Moro. And it seems like the consensus amongst the Italian public is still that Aldo Moro is very much planned by the state, and the Red Brigades are kind of just tertiary actors in the whole thing. But anyway.
Yeah, a lot of wild stuff there. I think you've been doing a fair job of covering this. I mean, we started. I think one of the initial episodes of this series, we kind of went over where we're coming from. I'm a little bit, I guess, one could say I'm a little bit more from the right, or a little bit more from the left, but I think to some degree that makes us look at it with a little bit more of a critical eye, because when it's coming from, I guess, roughly your side, although I feel like I apply the same filter on both sides of this or whatever. But I'll be honest, I find myself being more drawn to looking into like right-wing infiltration. I mean, this interests me as well, but obviously if you followed my body of work, you could tell I've definitely delved a little bit more into the right side of it. So I think maybe that's just given our aesthetics, that's what we're focused on more, because I guess I kind of want to get the riffraff out of there, although I want it on both sides. So I guess I look at this along a different paradigm. I think you probably do too, than just a simple left-right. I think this is just the powers that be above us manipulating our energies to get what they want, and I think we'll really see that through the course of digging through today's episode. Starting with the victim of what we're going to of the kidnapping that we're going to be talking about today. Aldo Moro who was a very connected political individual. So I'll let you take that and kind of jump off that wherever you want. I don't know where you want to enter into just kind of laying out who Aldo Moro was, but suffice it to say, he was a top tier political figure
Yes,
in where
yes.
he was at.
Can I just make a comment to like what you said about convergence of like leftist and right wing sort of extremism? I will say that a lot of the tactics that was used during the 60s and into the 70s, especially if you look at the Patty Hearst case, definitely parallel a lot of the later stuff in the OKC and some of the stuff that happened with the militia groups in like the 90s. Some people may disagree with that, but I see, even though there's like different dynamics at play, I definitely see that where it was solidified earlier from sort of researching and studying the intelligence agencies were getting their grasp on like the SLA and Patty Hearst, and they definitely were transferring a lot of these tactics. It's important to also note that I subscribe to the fact that Gladio and never really ended, and it was just transferred domestically, even though the FBI and the CIA allegedly don't really share one another. But we can't discount also military intelligence plays a big factor. And the difference in the Italian case is, I think, more of the, I'm not calling people fascists per se that are like right wing in America, but a lot of the fascists were direct state actors. And a lot of the, I'm learning that a lot of the Red Brigades had kind of a previous life, except Mario Moretti, which I'll touch upon, had kind of a past life as a fascist and somehow switched over to the leftist side. So it's very easy to see how two extremes can people can oscillate between the two extremes. But anyway, let me get into Aldo Moro.
Mm-hmm. Real quick, I did want to mention. I don't know why. I guess I don't think it's all that important, but I did want to at least make a remark about it. I just was thinking about with the Aldo Moro thing today, just an anecdotal parallel that I find kind of I don't know funny, interesting. I mean, just one data point, but it reminds me of the Gretchen Whitmer thing. I mean, obviously
Yes.
one went through, one didn't, but it was like I remember when I was like looking into that story from the jump. This like these militia members are going to kidnap and kill some governor. It just seemed outlandish. And then you learn about the Aldo Moro thing. You're like, oh, okay. And you hear about some state actor side of it, and you're like, oh, is this just old methodology being repurposed?
Yeah.
Like I said, though, it's just one data point, so you can't really make much of it. But either way, I just thought it was interesting. A little bit, I don't know, color, give a little historical context, I guess, to that at least, in the sense that like it's not quite as ridiculous as maybe some people may think of when they heard about the Gretchen Whitmer Fed napping plot or whatever.
I don't think it is. I mean, I personally don't think it is. The only really difference I see in America's political topography is there's never been really any kind of kidnapping of a major political figure, to my knowledge. It's never existed, so that's sort of where it's a little different. And like I said, the years of lead can be transferred to a lot of the extremism and to understand extremism, but I think it is very much Italian coded, maybe even European coded to a certain extent. But anyway, let me get into Aldo Moro.
Yep.
So Aldo Moro, did you want to say something? Sorry, I don't
No,
want to
no. You're good. I was just going to set you up to jump into it, but go ahead.
Okay, let me get into the Aldo Moro thing. So to understand Aldo Moro the man, we have to dissect his past. Aldo Moro was born on September 23rd, 1916, in a place in Italy called Maglia, Apulia, and he excelled in academics. And it's very important to note that Aldo Moro, like a lot of these people, including the Red Brigades, came from a very religious background. So whether they were like on the far right, and typically the Catholic Church has sort of been tilted, I would say, more to the far right. They took sort of a neutral stance when, fascist Italy was at its height, but definitely the cultural, I would say the cultural matrix of most of Italy is definitely tilted towards religiosity. And so what's interesting about him is that in his childhood, he had a fairly, happy childhood, quite unlike a lot of the people in the Red Brigades who Renato Curcio came from kind of an orphanage. He was kind of abandoned by his mother and by his father, neglected. We see various other people. Mario Moretti came from a very impoverished background, had a very unhappy childhood. So is true for another Red Brigade member named Barbara Belsalani. He had a very unhappy background. So it seems like Aldo Moro is the polar opposite of most of our subjects, although he comes from a kind of a working class but solidly middle class clerical background, I would say. So by 1939, he was basically publishing stuff on law, and he was appointed a professor. And so this is where the seeds of his political foundation sort of is forged. So he's like a member of something called the Federation of Catholic University Students. That's FUCI. This is also where he meets a very young Pope John Paul IV. So early on, Aldo Moro's kind of solidified deep ties to the Vatican and also to this understanding, I would say, of probably he encountered a lot of liberation theology, which I don't know if people are acquainted like with liberation theology. I'm not a big fan of it because quite personally, it's a little too woke for me, a little too on the side of wokeness. But at the time, that was sort of the flavor, I would say, of a lot of the didactics that were being undertaking for that time. And I must also add that Aldo Moro's family was kind of cloistered from the fascist around this time when Mussolini was thrown out of power in 1945. The Catholics kind of cloistered themselves, kind of either playing neutral or playing up to Mussolini. They weren't exactly on the side of Mussolini, but at the same time, it was sort of a institution in Italy. It was very hard to get rid of. This is like the opposite, I would say, of the relationship of the Christians and other, places like Germany. Just to juxtapose those two places, Germany had a sort of different understanding of Christianity than Italy at the time. So it was very much a part of like the fabric. So at the Federation of Catholic University, he makes not only early ties with the young Pope John IV, he also makes ties to a guy that will be a absolute maverick in Italian politics, Giulio Andreotti, which if you listen to most people in the modern day political discourse of Italy itself, they will tell you that Andreotti is not beloved like Aldo Moro is. Although he's very popular, his like campaign and like his sort of reign gave us people like Silvio Berlusconi. Berlusconi is a very scandalous figure, and he was very much the instrument of Giulio Andreotti. But Aldo Moro is kind of the different. So Aldo Moro starts experimenting with political ideas. And one of the political ideas that he is very much in love with, probably came from his Catholic background, is he wants the Christian Democrats and the mainline PCI, that's like the Communist Party in Italy. This is the mainstream Communist Party. This is not the extra parliamentary sort of extremist left that's in, like the Red Brigades or like the other sort of political groups that do more extremism. These are more of like mainline people that want to work within the system and want to encourage democracy, although I have my opinions on democracy. So
they're the TPUSA at the time.
I would say they're more of the I would say. Well, you mean like the Christian Democrats?
Yeah, I was just saying because they were like the college group or whatever. So like trying to give an idea of like they're not quite like the college groups we talked about that evolved into extremism. It's a little bit more working along electoral lines.
Yes, and also they're heavily backed, I want to say, by America. So of all the parties that's backed by America, the biggest ones that are influenced by America is probably Christian Democrats, and they're more like centrist, to where they have two wings of the party, but they might as well kind of be they might as well be the same. Very generic, I would say, politics, but they're very much a product also of the post-war, uh, you know, um, occupation of Italy, or but still, what's funny about, like, and I'll get back into Aldo Moro, but just to discuss a little bit about Italian politics, is that the MSI is there as well. And I think recently they had the female representative, I forget her name, but those are supposedly the fascist, the residual fascists that were in Mussolini's camp, that are still sort of represented today in parliamentary representatives. But yes, the Christian Democrats want, and Aldo Moro himself, and they have a socialist party too. And all these parties sort of collude together and have this sort of relationship. So he, at a very young age, he springs into kind of a position, to where he's one of the founding members of the Democratic, Christian Party. In 1946, he's 30 years old. He was elected to the Constituent Assembly, and as part of the elite commission of 75, he's pretty much, him and Giulio Andreotti are tasked with the writing of the Constitution of the Italian Republic. This is the first time, I guess, since the end of the war, they have sort of democracy, quote unquote. And I must also add that, the CIA actually did rig the elections, the early elections in Italy's, past. They did rig the elections. They did, interfere with elections, as they're known to do. That was probably the product of Angleton and some of the other people. So he drafted the fundamental articles regarding civil liberties and relationship between citizen and state. So let's fast forward, and I want to mention something about Aldo Moro. I think he was elected 5 times as prime minister. So of all the mainline sort of politicians, Aldo Moro probably has the best reputation, and surveying all the rest of, the Italian politicians at the time, he probably is the cleanest. But even he's sort of mired in scandals, which I will get into. So he became the political secretary of the Democratic Christian Democrats. He basically took a control at the time when Italy was going a lot. They were going through this like economic miracle around in 59, probably courtesy of the Marshall Plan. But there was still a lot of like social strife. And during this time, this is also where the PCI, or the mainstream Italian Communist Party, was trying to find its legs, because a lot of people, like in the mainline Communist Party, a lot of them came from the resistance, and they didn't like the fact that the MSI was there, and they felt the Christian Democrats at the time was a little too moderate when it came to cooperating with fascists. That was their opinion. So basically, Moro realized that to avoid any of the stuff from the past in Italy, there had to be some kind of a working class aligned centrist party. And this is where we call like opening the left, which is called Apertura ai Sinistria. This is where they also brought in the Socialist Party. And this is where sort of Moro causes the ire of other people. Because at that time, I know it's hard to believe for a lot of American audience, but at that time, the CIA had kind of a main line strict sort of, they didn't want communism to take power in any kind of state, and Italy was kind of their project to prevent the Soviet Union from encroaching upon Italy itself. Little do they know is that most of the leftists, and I'm not even going to say leftists, but most of the mainland communists were kind of just milquetoast and really weren't all that aligned with the Soviets itself. They were very much like baked into the fabric of Italy. There were only like ideological discrepancies between the two. It's not like they were aligned necessarily with they were aligned necessarily with the Soviet Union. So this was a very delicate alliance. Moro kind of served as prime minister across 3 consecutive terms from 1963 to 1968. So very much through the 50s and through the 60s, Moro doesn't have a lot of problems per se. So one of the things that Moro is famous for is the philosophical use of language, which the journalists used to joke about Moronese. He basically used complex grammar structure to intentionally kind of blur political lines. He created this like phrase called converging parallelisms. So it's like in parallel lines, Moro argued that politics, two completely opposing forces, could move in the same direction and produce the stability of the nation. So this is where the turmoil first gets into play. We're inching towards more political unrest. And I've sort of like glossed over a lot about Aldo Moro. But to be quite honest with you, he's an academic and a lawyer. I mean, he's kind of interesting, but he's not interesting to the point to where it deserves like a whole entire sort of, besides the incident, not to be cold or anything to Aldo Moro, but he was, yes, he was beloved, but and he was a good political strategist when it comes to trying to unify like diametrically opposing sides. But you could say he's also maybe charismatic to people, but in my readings of Aldo Moro, I just see him as like kind of a deeply spiritual, kind of centrist politician. So he did devise something called the historical compromise, which is something that I don't want to completely bore your audience per se with the historical compromise because I've went over that ad infinitum, but this is basically where they wanted to be inclusive of all the different like political parties. Did you want to interject,
No.
Jose?
I was just scratching. I didn't say anything.
Okay. So the historical compromise is where basically they want to, and this is a time when like somewhere around in the late 60s where like the whole hot autumn is happening with all of the different riots and all the different demonstrations in the streets, when sort of the youth of Italy are sort of finding their own way, both on the left and the right. This is also where Moro gets into a little bit of a problem, because what's pressing around the 1970s is the rise of the PFLP by George Habash in Palestine. Yes, they did include the PLO, but at that time there was this very big incident that happened where the Palestinians in 1973 hijacked an airliner in Fucimo airport in Italy, to where this caused quite a bit of disturbances in Italian politics itself, because this is like Italy was used to political extremism on its ground, but this is like a different type of political. This is foreign intervention. This also put him at odds with, let's just say, Israel at the time. Yes, I'm going to mention Israel at the time. And the Israelis didn't like the fact that Aldo Moro took a stance called Toldo Moro, which is they allowed the Palestinians to have basically free reign when it came to the airports. Basically, they could fuel up their planes. They could even take hijacked planes to the Italian airports. But the exchange was they weren't to do any kind of terrorism on Italian soil. They had to totally bypass Italy and maybe go to Germany or like some other parts of Europe where there was like constant hijackings during the 70s. This is also during the time of Carlos the Jackal, which is another figure that kind of gets intertwined with the years of lead, but is more on the side, I would say, of the Red Army faction, which is in Germany itself. Another thing is the Lockheed scandal is a big part of this era as well. It's where Italy were basically scamming contracts from Lockheed to take these Hercules airplanes and also, I believe, a couple tanks and some other various different airplanes, and they were doing this in exchange for, they basically were funneling kind of dark money into Lockheed, and this was like a big scandal around this time. Also around, just to rewind a little bit, one of the first coups, and this ties into the strategy of tension, is something called the piano solo. And this is the architect of a guy named De Lorenzo. De Lorenzo was a guy that did have ties to both Gladio and also to the P2 Lodge, which was disclosed in 1990. I'll get into the P2 Lodge eventually, but it was disclosed that De Lorenzo was, doing all kinds of, machinations with coup plots, and primarily a lot of these coup plots were sort of fascist people that were still embedded in the military, because at the time at Italy, there never was, like in Germany, there was like kind of a denazification. There was never a defascification of Italy. The fascists sort of just remained in military post. And I think even, this is the controversial part, and I think a lot of people disagree with, or maybe agree with, depending on whatever you're politically aligned with, is that James Jesus Angleton and some of the CIA thought that siding with like the remaining fascists would be a great way to stop, communism and the Soviet Union from encroaching upon Italy. That was their little pet project. Now, this goes to how much Moro knew about what was going behind the scenes, because a lot of Moro's constituents didn't want to include him on a lot of these things because of his centrist policies. They wanted to exclude him. He was beloved by the public, but not so much by, I would say, a lot of his colleagues, which plays into like sort of his kidnapping later on, when they take sort of a hardline stance against him negotiating. So Moro is aware of these incidents, and he's probably aware of Gladio too. And he's probably aware of something called the strategy of tension, which we've talked about. He tried to create a counterbalance to that called the strategy of attention. That is, to be vigilant and noticed that a lot of these forces were, not organic and not, part of Italy, that they were outside forces that were interfering with Italy itself, and they were trying to cause turmoil within Italian soil and trying to foment division amongst political parties he was trying to align himself with. So that's interesting. So the name of the general in 1960, let me just get into piano solo since I've sort of glossed over it a little bit.
No, just real quick though, just to recap,
Go
just to lay it out for the audience. I mean, to say that in a little bit more brief way, this was not a man who was towing the international hegemon's line at that point in time.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to explain because, like I said, politics in Italy is kind of nuanced and it shifts. So it's not very much like, our modern day era where there's like no clearly defined, fascist. I would even argue a lot of like the communist and fascists in America are kind of just LARPing, in my opinion. But the ones in Italy, they definitely have us, and I know that might piss some people off, but it's true in most cases. A lot of the people that call themselves fascists, and a lot of the Antifa types that call sort of like far right people, fascist, really were just throwing that that whole line around, because I guess they're using it as a stand-in for totalitarian. It's like that's been conflated with that, but just to elucidate, it's sort of like the terminology we're using. You get what I'm saying, right, Jose?
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
I'm just saying a lot of people in America are just kind of LARPing on both sides, to be quite honest with you. Just my opinion.
Yeah,
So,
I don't necessarily disagree.
I mean, from what I've read, in most cases, most people can't give you a good definition of like any of these like political terms. I mean, I don't want to underestimate your audience. I don't want to be condescending at all. They probably do, but I'm saying a lot of normies,
Yeah,
when you
not my
talk to them
audience.
out there.
You guys are the
Yeah,
good
well,
people. You guys know
yeah,
all the
that's what I'm
things. You're
saying.
the smart ones. You're the
That's what I'm
beautiful
saying.
ones. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying not your audience. I mean, I'm just talking about normies in general, kind of don't really have a good grasp on when they assert these. It's just sort of just name calling in most cases.
Okay.
So
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
let me get into like Moro's piano solo. So Moro had like he was trying to integrate the leftists in the cabinet. This sort of triggered, like I mentioned, major backlash with like the anti-communist Gladio officials, and the one particular guy that I mentioned, General Giovanni de Lorenzo, basically weaponized the military intelligence service, which at that time was called CFAR. That's SIFAR, and to draft something called the Piano Solo. It was basically a blueprint for lightning right-wing military coups. And here's a significance of why De Lorenzo is like important, is that he compiled over 157,000 illegal dossiers on politicians, including Moro, for blackmail leverage. So, faced with a civil war, Moro sort of compromised and had to scale back some of his historical compromise. And I said that the historical compromise does play into a good portion on why he was later targeted by the state. So that is definitely a big part of why. So let me go to next. I'm sure we're all familiar with Henry Kissinger, right? Good old Henry Kissinger.
Yep.
So
The earlier version of today's Marco Rubio. For those who aren't aware, they both are actually Kissinger had two cabinet positions. So does Marco Rubio. So
really,
Kissinger's the last person to have, I believe, the National Security Advisor, and then what's his other cabinet one? It's the I don't know. I should be embarrassed. I can't think of Rubio's other title. He took over for the Walls guy after the Signal Gate thing, but he already had a. I'm going to look it up real quick because now I feel stupid. I can't think of
okay.
what it is. It's a National Security Advisor and then Secretary of State. There you go. So Secretary of State, Kissinger was the last person to do that. So a lot of power there.
Yeah, the only pushback I would assert to that is I think Kissinger probably is a lot more smarter than Marco Rubio, and
Yeah.
probably a bit more of a better diplomat, even though Kissinger has kind of heavy hands when it comes to foreign policy. And he did, just to say something spicy about Kissinger, he did call the Vietnam veterans a bunch of dumb animals, which I don't think was very nice or patriotic of him, to say stuff like that. But he did say that, just for your audience to say. So it doesn't seem like he was a very good or, nice man, to be honest. He seemed kind of an asshole, but
He's like an angry little gnome. Yeah.
he's an angry little. Well, he's a vampire. He lived to like 100 years old. So
Yeah. A vampiric leprechaun. But yeah, go on.
So basically, because Aldo Moro was concerned about America encroaching into Italy, and he wasn't naive. I mean, Aldo Moro was a very smart guy and a very well-versed tactician when it came to politics. And he knew basically that a lot of the people in Kissinger's administration And one other fact about Kissinger is he supplied this guy named Vito Michelli, which I've discussed, which was involved with some of the early Red Brigade people that turned state on the Red Brigades, actually set up maybe the Piatano car bombing in the 70s, which was kind of like one of those incidents that kicked off the years of lead that coincided also with the Piazza Fontana. Don't know if you had any involvement with that, but Vito Michelli was getting money from Kissinger through the back door and supplying with money. The only thing he had to do was make sure communism did not take root in Italy. So the United States kind of feared at that time a communist presence in a NATO defense bloc. And quite honestly, just to mention the Soviet Union, to be fair, the Soviet Union didn't like also break off communism in other European countries either. They wanted to kind of be decentralized, communist vector of post Stalin, Soviet Union. So it seems like neither one of these wanted like communism to take root. To be fair, because I gloss over the KGB interference with Italy. It does come up in like the Red Brigades a whole lot, but I don't know how pertinent it is compared to the American forces. I do admit I have kind of a blind spot. So he went on a diplomatic trip to Washington, D.C. So basically, Kissinger, and this is contested by people, Kissinger told Moro to back off and to stop talking about any kind of historical compromise. I'm not paraphrasing, I'm sort of summarizing what he said. He told him to back off or that his life would be in danger. So he made a threat to Aldo Moro when he made that sort of visit in 1974, which, by the way, if you look at any kind of mainstream historical text on Aldo Moro, they will gloss over that and they will say that Kissinger never said that, although his wife Eleanor did state that that was said. And she stated that Aldo Moro told her specifically, he was quite shaken by that. You have to understand, Aldo Moro, coming from kind of the background he was, he was kind of I don't like to use the term effete, but he was sort of an effete academic. He wasn't this guy with a great military background. So it probably shook him quite tremendously. So after that statement in 1974, Aldo Moro kind of got up in arms about the whole American interference into Italy itself. And at that time, I don't think he was in a position of power like he was in 1978 to really do anything about it, other than just try to to the back channels. But one thing we do know is that Aldo Moro definitely they have suppressed his information, whether he was a politician or whether he got kidnapped by the Red Brigades. There was a lot of suppression of what he believed in, some of the historical compromise. And it's not like also the other people that were in the Communist Party in Italy, especially when Giulio Andreotti sort of shared the right wing with him as also co-prime minister. It's not like they wanted to back Moro either. So neither side, even though I said the PCI were kind of more amiable, they didn't really want to back Aldo Moro either. So he seems to have all these people tugging at him from various different sides. And let me also go into the Lockheed bribery scandal. Is there anything else from the scandals that you want to touch upon, Jose, that you want me to
I was just going to point out the obvious with Kissinger. For those who aren't aware, check early life. You're talking about the we were talking about their issues.
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
I mean, obviously he's kind of an agent of the American empire. So there, you named off multiple things. I mean, the Lockheed, the scandal. I mean, there's plenty of other stuff. But let's be real. The Palestinian one probably really did strike
Yes.
a nerve. That was pretty
Yes.
flagrantly against the program.
Let me also say maybe something spicy. I don't want to get you off YouTube, but about what Kissinger said about his own people. He said if people keep getting exiled and kicked out of multiple different communities, they must be doing something wrong. So some people will say that's based, and some people will say that's antiseptic,
Yeah.
depending on I guess whatever aisle you're on. But he did say that. I mean, these are like I said, Kissinger never he let loose with whatever he wanted to. Another interesting fact about him is I think he might have had sex with Gloria Steinem. Another kind of glowy leftist icon during the 60s. I believe that's kind of alleged. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's alleged that he might have had an affair with Gloria Steinem. I mean, who knows? Who knows if that's true or not? Just to put some little spicy tidbits about Kissinger. I mean, my favorite person in the world. So getting into the Lockheed bribery scandal, this is like something that was very important to Italy itself. The Lockheed bribery scandal is like basically American aerospace company. They paid massive kickbacks to an Italian politician to secure military aircraft contracts. So where Aldo Moro plays into this is that he was the mysterious, shadowy figure, code name Antelope Cobbler. So he was the recipient of the bribes. So yes, even Aldo Moro, like any politician, no matter how beloved they are, eventually will get their hands dirty if you are in the system. I mean, it just happens, I guess. So he defended his integrity in the sort of parliamentary speech. The scandal sort of damaged the Christian Democrat Party, and sort of this put him in a mode to where he had to enact his historical compromise. So we're talking about the time of 1976. This is like 2 years before the whole entire affair where he gets kidnapped at Viana Fani. And I guess let me get into the Viana Fani, or a little bit about the lead up to it. So I don't know how we're setting it time, so I want to be a little bit economic with the time.
Yeah.
So setting up to the beginning stages of sort of the planning of, and there is quite a bit of planning that went into the Aldo Moro kidnapping. And this broaches another subject, which is a favorite topic of historians. And whenever you look into the years of lead or about the Red Brigades, and I've been finding this more as I research into them, is they argue whether the Red Brigades are an organic creation of Italian soil or whether they had some outside influences. So I would argue, from my cursory knowledge of the Red Brigades and sort of diving into like sort of their backstory, I would argue, unfortunately, with the Red Brigades, I think with a lot of extremist groups, is they have a problem of infiltration. They have a problem because a lot of people in extremist groups, I guess, are very passionate to have other people join their ranks. So the Red Brigades, I guess, didn't have a very good vetting system because, or maybe they couldn't help it. I don't know. It's not clear exactly. But what has recently come up in the Italian, what's come up in the Italian press is, let me find this academic, this scholar that is talking about it now. I think this is brand new. His name is Giuseppe de Lutis. He's this academic that after all the years of pretty much, or actually a journalist and sociologist, I should say. After people have kind of glossed over the whole Hyperion school, and I briefly touched upon it briefly when we were talking about kind of the formations of the Red Brigade. But the Hyperion School, although it didn't exist allegedly until the official say that it was 1977, it had embedded itself into the Red Brigades in 1968 when they were part of called the Metropolitan Collective. And this had a guy named Corrado Simeone. This guy had a guy named Duccio, and I think a guy named Valerio Solaris, I believe is his name. So what's interesting about Corrado Simeone is that he forged early ties with one of the nucleus of the Red Brigades, that is Renato Curcio Maracagul and also Alberto Franceschini. They all forged kind of this early nucleus, and he was kind of in the backdrop. And while he was in, the Red Brigades, he was operating this sort of secret clandestine group called Super Clan. And the spinoff, of course, was called the Red Aunts, which we discussed previously. But Mario Moretti, who was a late addition to the nucleus, and really takes charge once Renato Curcio ends up in prison, he has direct ties to the Hyperion language school. Now you ask yourself, why is this important to the lead up to Aldo Moro's kidnapping? It's important because Mario Moretti's already a suspect. Already, when he's in college, he has affiliations with ultra right-wing fascist groups. He already has this sort of guy, this agent named Luigi Cavallo, who is this guy who spent a bunch of time in Nazi Germany, but was not a Nazi, but somehow also fought for the resistance as well, follows him and shadows him. And wherever Mario Moretti goes, he goes. And also the guy that I mentioned, the cuck, basically the duke or the nobleman, that was kind of a reactionary nobleman, where basically he liked to watch his wife get cucked, that Mario Moretti probably was involved, just to add that little detail. He also got him that job at Siemens, the factory, and Mario Moretti already goes under the name Rocco, and Rocco shows up in a lot of early declassified documents. The term Rocco, which he got from the Scarlet Pimpernel, which I think is a character in that particular play, in that particular book. So Mario Moretti has sort of this flair to evade detection, to infiltrate these various different groups. And he has this sort of asset that's trailing him. So what happens is that the Hyperion School has locations in France. And Mario Moretti is forging passports. He's forging documents. And this will play in later to the Aldo Moro kidnapping under the name Mario Braghi. He forges the documents, and he just has free movement. Even during the time of the Aldo Moro kidnapping, he has free movement everywhere within Italy itself. He goes to all these different places. Now, the controversy about the Hyperion School is not only their alleged kind of NATO or CIA connections. And by the way, the Hyperion School is known in sort of colloquial Italian politics and amongst the commoners as the old man. They called NATO the old man. The sort of leftists in Italy have their term for NATO as the old man, and they call that person the old man. And some people think the old man, and I think Alberto Franceschini called Corrado Simeone, he called him a term called the Englishman, because he didn't like the guy and he always suspected. But Alberto Franceschini kind of is a paranoid. He thinks that everyone is sort of an agent. But in many cases, it's turned out he's probably right. But Mario Moretti forges these ties to the Hyperion School. Now, there's a similar thing going on with the far right that I often reference called the agenter press. The agenter press is not a press, and it's really a front for a paramilitary school. So what I speculate, what Mario Moretti at this time, and now that all the nucleus of the Red Brigades are kind of in prison, and their presence has been dimensioned. This is the sort of time that Mario Moretti gets to shine when it comes to the Red Brigades. He now has full command because he's like the only person that has seniority within the Red Brigades. So this is where I think some of the early ideas about kidnapping Aldo Moro comes from, because the Hyperion School not only has connections to the Red Brigades, it also has connections to the Red Army faction, the Bader Meinhof, which is another sort of militant, communist, Marxist, Leninist group. Some people would argue they're blockist. That's a term for communists that don't have praxis, but only like extremism. So this is probably a front, I think, probably for some type of weird NATO type of paramilitary group that somehow has inched their way into, Gladio and amongst the sphere of Italian extremist politics. I think that's what the Hyperion School is definitely, and it's in its definality, and it's often been ignored by a lot of researchers, and a lot of people haven't really looked into it. They had a policy after the years of lead. They had a policy at the time to where they would welcome any far left revolutionaries. They would allow them, no matter what kind of crime they committed. They had a policy called the Metriard policy, to where even Antonio Negri, who was a Marxist type of academic, he somehow found his way also in France. So they harbored all these people within this milieu, and they allowed them to have like sort of free range. So also around this time, so the way that the early coordinated efforts on the Aldo Moro kidnapping is that, much like other sort of kidnapping, is the Red Brigades coordinated for people from each cell, people in Genoa, people in Milan, and people in Rome. Although the Rome column at that time seems to have taken the lead, this was not the case in the nucleus. The Milan column was more of the place where most of the action was happening. So after Renato Curcio and Alberto Franceschini and Mara Cagul, of course, died, was killed, it seems Rome took the lead. So they had all these people handpicked, and around this time he is known as Mario Braghi under an assumed name. So he rents an apartment, and I won't quite get into this, maybe if we have time, but it's the Via Gondoli, which this is an apartment complex that is heavily tied to where they speculate Aldo Moro may have been held at one time, but he rents this under an assumed name. This is also a very glowy place, to where this has direct connection to military intelligence or civilian intelligence as well, the SDS-DME, which was sort of the branch. I should also mention that because of the piano solo and because of the Borghese coup and the Rose of Winds coup, in that time, the military intelligence in like Italy itself was disbanded, and they disbanded it mainly because of those actions of a lot of those colonels and a lot of those generals had like basically staged these coups with remaining fascists at the time. So it seems like he's in the Hyperion School. He's forging these documents. He's acquiring these various different apartments, and this pretty much sets us up for the Via Fani And he also, of course, like scouts out Aldo Moro. Initially, he wanted to kill Giulia Andretti. He wants to kill him at first, and Alberto Francisini, as I mentioned in previous episodes, wanted to kill him as well, and he almost did, but he decided not to. So Aldo Moro is a soft target because he surveys his goings, and they're very familiar with the Via Fani type of. And I should mention about Aldo Moro is he had this sort of convoy, these various different 5 carabinieri and military bodyguards, which followed him from place to place. And let me briefly go back to Aldo Moro for a minute. Now, Aldo Moro, because of all what's going on in Italy at the time, and matter of fact, he's at his office, I believe it's someplace in like downtown Rome. An incident occurs to where a motorcyclist pulls up and just lets off machine gun fire. And and this is like, I would say, a day before he gets kidnapped. There's this person that just shows up on a motorcycle and just lets off sort of, ammunition rounds right in front of Aldo Moro and his bodyguard, Arreste. So this shakes him. Also, Aldo Moro was concerned about his cars because they were not bulletproof. This is also a very controversial position, in that a lot of people think that they set Aldo Moro up because his security detail begged the government to give him, bulletproof. And this was like when there was a lot of like violence. 1977 was where violence just automatically just sprung up from the far left and from the far right. Actually, it was more, I think this time it was more of a far left phenomenon, although there were like far right people also that were participating in violence. But there was these riots that were occurring everywhere, and the government didn't have the common sense to give Aldo Moro bulletproof, convoys. They did like protect him with very skilled carabinieri, and just to reiterate, the carabinieri in Italy itself are more modeled after like a paramilitary unit. So they're not like just average cops in America. They actually are trained to be like a military and to handle sort of military situations. And maybe that's some of the confluence also that they got involved with, like the P2 Lodge as well. So this sets up the stages about with Aldo Moro. And this also goes into the very suspiciousness of, or very sus background of, Mario Moretti, who will play a big part in, the Aldo Moro Via Fani massacre and kidnapping. Let me mention also that some of the machine guns that were used by the, so the Red Brigades themselves, they actually were bought, especially this guy named Valarucci. Valarucci, one of the main people that let off shots at that incident. He actually acquired one of these machine guns through an informant, and doesn't seem to care about that. And just to conclude, also, I will say that most of what we collect, and we will get into the Via Fani massacre and kidnapping, but most of the stuff that's collected about this case is from testimonials of the Red Brigades themselves. And one can conclude how reliable a lot of their testimonies are in court. A lot of them want to really champion themselves and really elevate themselves to these great revolutionaries that planned this out. And it seems like the government and a lot of like consensus historians also want to parade this whole entire thing, that the Red Brigades are like one mind, they're just one brain, and they just orchestrated the whole thing. And don't get me wrong, a lot of the people in the Red Brigades themselves were very smart, they were very skilled, but they were not they did not have military background. They did not have military background. And matter of fact, their military background was primarily going into the mountains and shooting off rounds, basically, just like militia members. And none of the people had any kind of military background, except maybe for Mario Moretti might have been being trained by the Hyperion School. But we're talking about people that were primarily Marxist, Leninist academics and people that maybe some of the more marginal members came from like a working class background. They didn't have any military training. So I will leave it there.
All right, yeah. Well, then let's. I guess. Well, let's jump right into the massacre and the kidnapping. Get right into the meat of it, and then I guess we'll probably leave it there for next time we dig into it to get into. I guess we're kind of being maybe a little tight-lipped in the spoiler of how this kidnap ends up working.
Yes.
Yes. But yeah, this is. But anyways, take it away.
No, basically what happens is that this was sort of coordinated effort, and I'm giving out the sort of mainstream consensus about the kidnappings and the massacre at Via Fani. So what happens is that the night before, Mario Moretti scouts out the place. There's this florist that goes around Via Fani, and he slashes the tires of the florist. And this is like late at the night before ever this convenes. So what they also do is they end up stealing a bunch of cars. They end up stealing a bunch of cars, a bunch of Fiats. I believe one is sort of the car. It has diplomatic plates, and they scout out Aldo Moro. And around 8:55, Aldo Moro shows up. So initially, when the convoy goes down the street, Mario Moretti, who's mainly driving the white Fiat with a lot of the diplomacy plates, he ends up basically almost losing them. So he speeds up ahead of the cars. And what he does is he does kind of an L maneuver into the cars. And the cars end up just running. The cars that are carrying Aldo Moro and his bodyguards end up basically colliding and also colluding. And I should say also that Barbara Belzerani is kind of in another Fiat car that they had stolen, and she's kind of the lookout. So they have like these other two cars that are blocking the sort of the direction of the cars. So no cops or nobody can no civilian cars can kind of get past. So they blocked them off in kind of an L-shaped maneuver. Are you kind of familiar with that, Jose? That kind of L-shaped maneuver?
I mean, I can guess, but I don't have any sort of intimate knowledge of it.
And I want to say I don't have any intimate knowledge of ballistics or planning this stuff, but apparently the L maneuver that they used was very much like what the Bader Meinhof or Red Army faction had done previously when they kidnapped this German industrialist. They had done sort of the same ambush tactic. So what happens after that, and of course they have another Red Brigade member who's a female. She waves the bouquet of flowers before they have the go. And so and she's on a moped. So basically when that happens, what happens is that the three gunmen emerge from kind of the shadow from the backdrop, and they just unload on Aldo Moro's, onto his car. And this is a matter of like almost like 5 to 15 minutes, this rapid fire, and they kill most of the bodyguards. And some of the controversy about this case is that there was not just firing coming on the right side where there were the gunmen, but there was also firing from the left side as well. They explain this away as one of Aldo Moro's bodyguards is trying to protect him, and thus that's where the sort of fire. So this was a very well coordinated type of maneuver, And this was a very well coordinated, and I'm not sure that even Mario Moretti had the capacity. So this is where kind of some of the conspiracy comes in, that there may have been like an extra gunman at the scene. There may have been someone else that may have assisted. So there's a total of 91 shots that's fired off. Most of the shots coming from the submachine gun by Vario Marucci, and from some of the other gunmen, which were, I believe, like 3 in total. So that's where like sort of the point of contention. So what they do is they have also a getaway driver. They all get out of the car, and they all stuff Aldo Moro within the trunk of the car, and they will have a series of trade-offs in cars, and they will spirit Aldo Moro away to his hideaway.
All right. Looks like we have arrived at kind of at our destination. Next episode, we'll be going into, spoiler alert, the death of Aldo Moro, the killing of Aldo Moro. But is there anything, Doc, that you wanted to go into, I guess, to kind of complete, this side of our coverage of the Aldo Moro incident before we get out of here? I mean, if not, we can go ahead and do plugs and bounce. But I don't know if there's something you felt like should round out today's talk.
So basically, what I want to say is that I don't buy the consensus of historians about this being simply a solitary Red Brigade type of action. I kind of subscribe to the thesis that I believe there may have been state actors implanted within the kidnapping itself. And clearly, I will say Aldo Moro had a chilling effect. And hopefully next time we'll go more into like the ballistics of like the killing and some of the other like the theories. I mean, I'm not going to call them conspiracy theories, but we'll go in more at the sort of cases why that's probably not the case. So I thank you for bringing me on, Jose, to discuss the sort of the kidnapping of Aldo Moro. We'll get into some of the other juicy details about it next episode.
Well, thanks for coming on. Now, to be very clear to the audience, just so you guys don't get it caught up, there is a captivity period. So, like, I know we're saying he dies, but, like, just be very clear. We're talking about the kidnapping. We have gotten to the kidnapping. Next episode, we'll talk about the captivity and the killing, and probably
and some of the people, some of the actors that are involved as well.
Exactly. But with that, Doc, you want to let people know where they can find you, and we'll do this again here soon. We'll schedule another episode here in a few.
All right, thanks for bringing me on, Jose. You can find me at Demento Mori. That is on YouTube, and I'd appreciate if you subscribe to my YouTube channel and support my work. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. For those who want to support what I'm doing, leave a like, share, subscribe, comment, leave a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. You can find the show on YouTube, Rumble, all the major audio podcatchers, and Twitter as well. On Twitter, that's at TowerGangJose. Everywhere else, it's the No Way Jose podcast. And if you want to support the show the best way you can do that with money over at patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. Up there in the top left-hand corner, you'll see a QR code. You can use that as well if you would prefer. It brings you to the same place. And the low level of $2 over there, you get access to early episodes. I do 1 to 2 episodes per week. I also keep 3 to 4 behind the paywall at any given time. Give you guys access to an ad-free RSS feed. Give you guys access to Telegram, pre-show, post-show, and video calls of me and Austin's weekly live call-in show, Already Dead, which is on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. I also get a big shout out. The highest level of my Patreon is a big thank you for their support. And my previous co-host and Tower Gang at Leonard Toad. Also at Red Brigades, at ZOVRCK, at _Vazil, Tim Tuttle, at John Cleveland, big fan of the show, Torme, at Wayne Tackless, 100 Car for Kids, No Free Lunch, Jack, Mark Vestibule, Jacob Wintergrad, the Biblical Anarchy Podcast, and John Black, you beautiful bastard. And with that, we are out of here. We will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.